Europe, many of the experts that were brought into play to advise and influence the national delegations that assembled in Paris to negotiate the new map of Europe were not economists. They tended to be historians and geographers and classically trained Oxford academics, for example, who weren't necessarily aware or mindful of creating a new economically integrated and viable European world. Poland was reconstituted in the east. The Baltic republics of Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia are established. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, this vast zone to the southern part of Europe, is divided up into a range of smaller states, Austria and Hungary itself, but also the new Federal Republic of South Slav Republic of Yugoslavia.
The Ottoman Empire, of course, had been huge in the history of the Middle East and of Europe. I mean, they very nearly took Vienna, and we would have had a very different history, I think, in Europe if the Ottomans had kept on expanding. They still, however, at the time of the First World War, controlled a great deal of territory. They controlled part of the Balkans in the very southern part, small slice. They controlled what is today modern Turkey. They controlled what is today most of the modern Middle East. They controlled Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and of course what became the State of Israel. So this was a very big, very multinational empire. They came in, I think, because they thought Germany was likely to win, and they had a number of Germans already working in the Ottoman Empire. There was quite a strong sympathy. They also came in on the German side because they were worried about Russia, and one of Russia's great goals had always been to get control of the straits, which lead from the Black Sea into the Mediterranean.
The leaders more or less sort of cut up the Middle East and awarded bits of it to different people. And they created the area of Palestine. They created essentially the relationship of a country like Jordan to its neighbours. They didn't know much about Islam, and so it didn't take into account the religious factor at all at that time, with the exception of some great scholars. And therefore what emerged from the First World War was an artificial structure which ever since then has been the source of huge anger, rejection, frustration in the Middle East. We still haven't begun to get the Middle East right.
Security measures are imposed by the British. Scores of Jewish leaders are jailed and rigid searches are conducted for terrorist weapons. These measures follow the hanging of 2 British sergeants by extremists. Palestine becomes an armed camp. Bound for Palestine,
I think what World War I did is make possible the achievement of the Zionist dream. I mean, Zionism was a movement among European Jews well before the First World War, and the idea of establishing a Jewish homeland in what was a province at the time of the Ottoman Empire was well established.
only those in need of medical attention are taken ashore.
What the First World War did by shaking the Ottoman Empire to pieces and eventually removing it from the face of the earth was to make it possible for the Jewish homeland to be established. What also happened, of course, in the course of the war, the British government, in an effort to win the support of world Jewish opinion to the side of the Allies, issued the Balfour Declaration, which gave, in a way, official recognition to the idea that there should be a Jewish homeland in Palestine. The great empires vanished very quickly at the end of the First World War. The Ottoman Empire lingered on for a bit, but it was clearly doomed, and most of its Arab territories had already been taken by the British and the French. And in the case of Austria-Hungary, it virtually collapsed in the summer of 1918. It was very confusing for people living in both empires. I mean, they'd been used to living in empires which had lasted for centuries. And those empires, of course, had their faults. There were many complaints about them. But they had provided a sort of stability. And suddenly, people throughout the Middle East and in the center of Europe found themselves living in a world where they didn't know what country they belonged to. It wasn't quite clear what the borders of those countries would be. A whole lot of small wars were breaking out between different national movements trying to grab territory. And so it was, in fact, a very, very difficult time for people.
We had the Balkan Wars and the Balkan battles, which have lasted almost right up to present time.